Just weeks after delivering Singapore's Budget 2026, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong will travel to Kuala Lumpur on February 20th for talks with Malaysian Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. The visit, announced by Malaysia's Foreign Ministry on February 19th, marks the latest in what has become an unusually active sequence of high-level meetings between the two closely integrated neighbors. This meeting comes just over 2 months after the most recent leaders' retreat held in Singapore on December 4th, 2025, making it a relatively quick follow-up engagement at the highest level. The frequency of these interactions reflects what both governments have characterized as an increasingly active bilateral relationship across multiple domains. According to the Malaysian Foreign Ministry's statement, both prime ministers are expected to discuss bilateral cooperation and issues of mutual interest, including the outcomes of the December leaders' retreat. While full details of the agenda have not been publicly disclosed ahead of the visit, the pattern of recent engagements suggests discussions will cover infrastructure progress, economic cooperation, and regional coordination. The ministry noted that Singapore is Malaysia's neighbor and key partner in ASEAN, with close and extensive relations in various fields. To put this in perspective, bilateral trade between the two countries reached 402.35 billion ringgit, equivalent to approximately $93.97 billion in 2025, an increase of 1.5% compared with 2024. Singapore remains Malaysia's second-largest trading partner. The timing of the visit carries practical significance. Prime Minister Wong recently concluded Singapore's Budget 2026 presentation in Parliament, a major annual commitment that traditionally occupies significant government attention. The decision to schedule a bilateral visit so soon after the budget indicates the priority both governments place on maintaining momentum in their cooperation. This visit also carries significance as part of leadership consolidation in both countries. Prime Minister Wong, who assumed office on May 15, 2024, is navigating Singapore's generational leadership transition, while Prime Minister Anwar, leading Malaysia since late 2022, manages a diverse governing coalition. High-level bilateral visits serve not only policy purposes, but also diplomatic signaling, reaffirming institutional continuity despite leadership changes. To understand the substance of what both leaders are likely to discuss, some background on recent developments is essential. The December 4th Leaders' Retreat, which was the 12th in the series of annual Singapore-Malaysia leadership meetings, covered substantial ground. That gathering coincided with the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries, a milestone both sides marked with renewed commitments to strengthen cooperation. At that December meeting, the leaders welcomed progress on several major infrastructure and connectivity projects. Chief among these is the Johor-Bahru-Singapore Rapid Transit System Link, commonly known as the RTS Link. During the retreat, both sides signed a supplementary agreement to the RTS Link bilateral agreement, which serves to facilitate preparations for the co-located customs, immigration, and quarantine facilities ahead of the targeted service commencement date at the end of December 2026. The RTS Link represents one of the most significant cross-border infrastructure projects in the region. The 4-kilometer rail connection will link Bukit Chegar Station in Johor Bahru with Woodlands North Station in Singapore, with the capacity to transport up to 10,000 passengers per hour in each direction. The journey time is expected to be approximately 5 to 6 minutes. Construction began in both countries in late 2020 and early 2021, and as of mid-2025, the project had achieved over 65% completion, with both countries on track to meet the end in 2026 target for operations to commence. The significance of the RTS link extends beyond transportation. To understand why, it is necessary to look at the broader economic vision both countries are building together. The rail connection forms a critical piece of infrastructure supporting the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, which was formally established through an agreement signed on January 7, 2025, during the 11th Leaders' Retreat held in Putrajaya, Malaysia. The JSSEZ, as it is commonly abbreviated, covers more than 3,500 square kilometers across southern Johor and comprises 9 designated flagship zones, including Johor Bahru City Centre, Iskandar Puteri, Tanjung Pelepas, Pasir Gudang, Senai, Forest City, and Pengerang. The economic zone aims to leverage complementary strengths between Singapore and Johor, allowing businesses to establish integrated operations across both jurisdictions. Singapore established a JSSEZ project office in April 2025, bringing together the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Economic Development Board, and Enterprise Singapore to provide coordinated support for companies looking to expand into Johor. Malaysia, in turn, launched the Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center Johor in February 2025 as a one-stop center to fast-track permits and approvals. Both prime ministers have described the JSSEZ as having the potential to serve as a model for ASEAN economic integration. During a June 2024 joint press conference, Prime Minister Wong stated that what Singapore and Malaysia are doing together is in many ways what ASEAN ought to be doing to strengthen our economic integration as one community. Prime Minister Anwar echoed this sentiment, emphasizing the zone's potential to demonstrate how regional cooperation can be operationalized beyond political declarations. The success of the JSSEZ will serve as an important test case. Previous ambitious cross-border projects, including the proposed Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail, failed to materialize after years of planning. That project was terminated in January 2021, with Malaysia paying nearly 102.8 million Singapore dollars to Singapore to settle the cancellation. The RTS link and JSSEZ differ in important respects. The RTS is a shorter connection with clearer demand fundamentals, while the JSSEZ focuses on regulatory coordination rather than massive capital expenditure. Whether these structural differences translate into successful implementation will become clearer as the RTS link approaches its targeted late 2026 opening and as businesses begin establishing operations under the JSSEZ framework. Beyond infrastructure and economic cooperation, the December Leaders' Retreat also addressed what both sides acknowledge as long-standing bilateral issues. Three matters received particular attention: airspace management, water arrangements, and maritime boundaries. On each, the approach has shifted from confrontation to methodical problem-solving. Prime Minister Anwar stated at the time that while these issues carry complexity, there is no hostility between the two countries, and that both sides now have the parameters clear regarding what is required by each side, allowing officials to work towards mutually beneficial solutions. On the question of airspace, discussions have focused on ensuring efficient flight management for aircraft operating to and from Singapore's Changi and Seletar airports, as well as Malaysian airports, particularly those in Sabah and Sarawak in the eastern part of the country. Both governments announced that officials are undertaking a joint study to optimize air traffic management based on agreed principles and parameters to meet future needs. The water question, which has historically been one of the more sensitive elements of the bilateral relationship, appears to have entered a more constructive phase. Prime Minister Anwar described water as no longer a contentious issue for Malaysia during the December press conference, while acknowledging Johor's growing water requirements. He welcomed Singapore's proposal for potential investments in infrastructure to strengthen the resilience and quality of the Johor River, particularly given future uncertainties such as dry spells or climate change impacts. Officials from both sides are discussing the price of raw and treated water without prejudice to one another's positions, according to Prime Minister Wong. Maritime boundaries remain what Prime Minister Anwar characterized as the most challenging. The issue involves the precise delimitation of the maritime boundary in the Johor Strait, an area where both countries have overlapping port limits and where extensive land reclamation activities by Singapore have changed coastal geography over decades. Both governments agreed during the December retreat on an indicative timeline to finalize the precise location of their maritime boundaries, with joint technical efforts to commence in accordance with the Strait Settlements and Johor Territorial Waters Agreement of 1927. What distinguishes the current approach to these issues from past episodes of bilateral tension is the consistent emphasis by both leaders on maintaining momentum in other areas of cooperation, even while discussions on difficult matters continue. Prime Minister Anwar specifically noted that neither side will take actions to frustrate the movement of people or goods while these discussions proceed, a practical assurance that matters to the hundreds of thousands of people who cross the Singapore-Malaysia land border each day. The February 20th visit will provide Prime Minister Wong and Prime Minister Anwar an opportunity to review progress on the various work streams that emerged from the December retreat. Given that only 2.5 months will have passed between the meetings, substantial new agreements are less likely than updates on implementation of existing commitments. There are also broader regional and international contexts worth noting. Malaysia currently holds the ASEAN chairmanship for 2025, a rotating responsibility that places Prime Minister Anwar in the position of shepherding ASEAN through what both leaders have described as an increasingly demanding geopolitical landscape. Prime Minister Wong has expressed Singapore's strong support for Malaysia's chairmanship and acknowledged Prime Minister Anwar's leadership in keeping ASEAN cohesive and forward-looking during a period of heightened global tensions. The visit occurs amid evolving regional dynamics. Southeast Asia continues to navigate geopolitical competition involving major powers, particularly the United States and China. Both Singapore and Malaysia have advocated for ASEAN centrality and a rules-based regional order. Coordination between neighboring ASEAN members strengthens collective positioning in multilateral forums. For Singapore, the relationship with Malaysia carries both practical and strategic weight. Malaysia supplies a significant portion of Singapore's water under long-term agreements dating back to 1961 and 1962. Malaysia is also a major source of food imports and a key transit point for goods moving through the region. Beyond material dependencies, the two countries share deep historical, cultural, and familial ties, with hundreds of thousands of people crossing the land border daily for work, education, family, and leisure. For Malaysia, Singapore represents not only a major trading partner and source of foreign direct investment, but also a model of effective governance and economic management in certain domains. The JSSEZ represents an acknowledgement that rather than competing directly, both sides can benefit more from structured complementarity. Singapore providing financial services, advanced manufacturing, and regional headquarters functions, while Johor offers land, labor, and manufacturing capacity at more competitive costs. The continuity of engagement also reinforces investor confidence. Singapore-Malaysia economic integration plays a role in regional supply chain planning and foreign direct investment decisions. High-level diplomatic stability signals predictability to businesses operating across the border, particularly as both countries compete for investment in advanced manufacturing and technology sectors. Prime Minister Wong's first visit to Malaysia as Prime Minister occurred in June 2024, shortly after he took office, as part of introductory visits to Southeast Asian capitals. Since then, there have been two formal leaders' retreats, along with encounters at regional forums. Both leaders have stated their intention to ensure that officials at all levels continue to interact and find ways to resolve outstanding issues while identifying new areas for cooperation. It is important to recognize that not all high-level visits produce immediate, tangible policy outcomes. In diplomatic practice, sustained engagement itself carries value. As both leaders meet on February 20th, the focus will be on translating December's agreements into measurable progress. From RTS construction milestones approaching the late 2026 target to businesses beginning to establish operations under the JSSEZ framework. For the hundreds of thousands who cross the border daily and the companies planning integrated operations across both countries, the stability of this relationship is not abstract diplomacy. It is the infrastructure of daily life and economic opportunity.